Hey, good morning. So very quickly, just to show you a few tricks with clay, you need your clay, you need a few modeling tools here. One of my favorites is something like this, these blue plastic tools with kind of a thinner edge on them. Pointed sticks work pretty good, and a little bit of water, and you're working on a sheet of canvas here, and the advantage of the canvas is that the clay doesn't stick to the canvas very well. And that's good for cleaning up, okay? I also have a wet wipe handy just in case I need to wipe my tools off later on. And that's a great way to kind of keep the tools in good working order. Just throw the wet wipe away when you're done. Here are some pieces that I picked up in Thailand. They're cute little animals made with terracotta clay. Terracotta is a red clay. They're hollow inside, and that's kind of important because if they are hollow, they're less likely to blow up in the kiln. Anything that's a solid, when it's fired in our big oven called the kiln, if it's solid, the moisture inside, the water inside, tends to turn into a gas at the boiling point. You know what boiling is, right? Water turns to a gas. And when things turn to a gas, they explode. So we've got to be careful to keep these things somewhat hollow. I use my sense of touch quite a bit, so I really don't need to look at what I'm doing here, okay? So if I tear this in half, I can gauge the weight in my two hands. This one in my right hand seems to be a bit heavier than this one in my left. I imagine that if I made a ball out of this one in my right hand and compared it in size to this one in my left hand, I would see that there might be a slight difference in size. I don't know if I can see that under the camera or not. Actually, it looks like the left one's a little bigger, but typically your sense of touch is super important for determining what you've got in your hand and then what you can do with it. I'm going to pinch off a little bit of clay. You've got to keep clay moist, but not too moist. So every once in a while, I may put a little water on the palm of my hand. As I'm handling the clay, it will keep the clay from drying out too rapidly. We need moisture in the clay. The water, the moisture in the clay, allows the clay to be shaped. Once the clay dries out, it can no longer be shaped. And at that point, we can't do anything with it except recycle it if we're not going to use it, or fire it in the kiln. Now that little ball can be created here on the canvas using the flat part of your hand, or it can also be, let me take even a smaller piece of it, made into a ball right there in the palm of your hand, okay? You notice I'm just using a single finger like that. And I can feel that that's correct. I can take that little ball and flatten it if I want to. I can squeeze it if I want to. This might make a cute little ear, or maybe a tooth, or maybe a horn. You can see that when horns and ears are attached, they're actually quite sturdy. And they're attached using a technique called slipping and scoring, which we're going to do in a moment. If these small attachment points were not slipped and scored, the details would not stay on, so we've got to be careful always to slip and score. I'm going to take another little piece of clay, make a ball, which is pretty fundamental, pretty basic to clay, and then I'm going to make something called a coil. Now with a coil, you roll only in one direction and you create what looks like a cylinder, all right? You don't want to make these too long and too skinny because they tend to break pretty easily. Something to remember with ceramics is that once it's dried and fired, it can be very fragile and easily broken. So something small like this is more easily damaged or broken than something a little bit thicker. So remember that when you're hand building, okay? Anything that's long and thin and sticks out, very likely to get broken. Now let's say I have a little creature. I'm going to make a little creature right now. Make a ball. I'm going to take my thumb and press in there and gently pinch open this into a pinch pot. My pinching action is very, very small, and I'm just pinching a little bit at a time, and I'm feeling inside and outside to determine if the walls of my pot are fairly even. So the walls would be these things right here. And there's my little pinch pot right there. That could be the mouth of something if I wanted it to, right? And now I'm going to make it frowning. And so with that frowning mouth, I might stick on this ear, or maybe that's an eyeball, I don't know. To stick that on, I'm going to create some slip. Slip is just liquid clay. I'm going to create some score marks Those are tiny little lines. You can slip and score more than once to make sure that that area is prepared to accept this little ear. I've got to do the same thing to the little ear. I've got to slip that edge, which is going to attach. I've got to score that edge, and slipped and scored, I can now put those together with a little pressure, clean up a little bit, maybe even clean up with my modeling tool, and that should be secure. That will not fall off. If I wanted to attach this, let me bend this over. It's bending, but in bending I see it may start to crack a little bit. That means it's drying out. Got to be careful about that. I'm going to attach this right here. So again, slip and score. There's my slip, my liquid clay. I'm going to slip both pieces that are going to be attaching. There's some slip right there, there's some slip right there. Since I've got this in my hand, let me take my modeling tool and make some little score marks there, little score marks there. Let's see where it's going to fit here. I'm going to make little score marks here. I might wind up making too many, but that's okay. I can always smooth those areas out later. Attach, attach. Use a little pressure to wiggle those pieces together. Come back in, smooth out your joints if you can with a finger or a modeling tool, and you can see, strange as it appears, that's the start of my little creature, my little monster. Now I realize he's tiny and I'm not going to finish him, but you understand that when you attach one piece of wet clay to another, you always must slip and score. If you don't do that, your pieces are likely to fall off later on when the clay dries out, which means you weren't following proper slip and score technique, and that would be a deduction of points, okay? Now, you try.